Hello everyone, and welcome to another video by Derek Slide, #1 noob on the NA server. I'd like to talk about the Warspite. This is going to be a Warspite Tier 6 Premium Battleship review. We'll go over the statistics of the ship. I won't be showing any gameplay. If you'd like to see gameplay of a particular ship that I've reviewed, you can always come onto my stream at twitch.tv/DerekSlide and request the ship. You can tell me you've seen the video or not, it doesn't matter. Usually, it depends. Maybe I've got a specific goal, I won't be able to play it, but usually I'm down to play whatever ship I have, especially the premiums. So if you'd like to see it showcased, feel free to ask there. Now I'll be going over the contents of the video with you real quick, so if you want to skip ahead, you know where to go. First thing, we're going to be talking about her statistics. Then we're going to be assessing why they are good or bad. Then we are going to talk about her modules, what modules should be equipped, what optional modules rather, and then what captain skills you'd like to get for your Warspite. Finally, I'll be offering a buy rating on the ship, so either it's either a buy, a hold, or a pass. So let's start with the statistics on the Warspite. She's got a decent amount of hit points for her tier. She's a tier 6 at 53,800. Her armor scheme is good, but not good enough when she sees her tier 7 or 8 counterparts. You'll have to do some heavy angling to bounce some of the shells, and the fact is 25 millimeters of armor can get overmatched by 15-inch guns or higher. That means she's vulnerable to her own guns. She'll also be vulnerable to anything in the tech tree 15-inch, or for another premium ship 15-inch or higher. She's also very vulnerable to IFHE. She takes a lot of damage from cruisers with 150 to 152 millimeter guns or higher that have the IFHE perk, and obviously 203 millimeter guns don't need the IFHE perk to devastate the Warspite. So something to keep in mind. Her torpedo protection is, I wouldn't use the word bad, but it's adequate. At 24%, if you get hit by a torp, it's gonna hurt. But it's not going to be as bad if you get hit in the where the bulge is, and the bulge does do a good job of covering most of the ship. It's really the worst time you're going to take damage is when you take it in the bow or the aft. The Warspite's good like that. She's good, so to speak, at eating damage, maybe mitigating torp damage, but she's good at that. So that's the survivability aspect of the Warspite. It should be noted that the Warspite's repair only lasts, this is part of her survivability package, only lasts 5 seconds. It's only active for 5 seconds, but it reloads at 60 seconds, which, is better than most other ships, most other battleships. As you can see here, the Arizona is active for 20, and then the reload 72. Should be noted, though, that if you are using the Warspite, you're going to want to time your repairs very carefully. Because the reality of the situation is waiting a whole 60 seconds for your repair to come back up means that if you get lit on fire or flooded, you're getting lit on fire and flooded for the duration with no hope of removing it. And this is a rule that goes for most battleships, or for all battleships rather, but it's especially important to consider that on the Warspite, it's active for 5 seconds. So if you have 3 fires, 4 fires, if you're not running fire prevention, 3 or 4 fires, you hit your repair, but do something to get yourself out of the fight, or you are going to be punished further. She also has a decent heal, and this heal is, the same as, for example, we'll take a look at the Arizona. It heals a little bit more hit points in the pick right now because, or from what you're seeing right now, because I am using a flag to heal extra hit points, right? But the reality of the situation is that it does nonetheless heal the same as other tier 6 battleships. Let's talk about her guns for a bit. She has 15-inch guns. They're good. Her sigma value, along with her dispersion values, are pretty decent. So she'll usually hit whatever she's shooting at. It's important to know that the Warspite's shells, the shell velocity is really low. So you're going to have to lead a little bit more to get the same hits on a target. In addition, with the 15-inch guns, you don't on the Warspite, you don't have a lot of range. Your base is 16.3. This means you're probably going to be up close to the fight, although you can use your spotter plane to snipe a little bit. You're going to be up close, so this is a more of a mid to close range battleship. She doesn't fare too well at close range, but she does have an asset which we'll talk about later. When she closes to close range combat, she has an asset which will serve her in that particular role. Her secondary armament's actually pretty formidable. She's got a total of 8 secondaries on both sides, and they actually fare pretty well against targets that get into the firing range. I don't know if the accuracy's better, but the Warspite secondaries have saved me several times. Now, I'm not suggesting you build a secondary build with your Warspite, albeit, if that is something you want to do, this isn't the worst ship you could do it on. It is certainly not the best, though. She is at tier 6, so she'll get limited bonuses from being fully spec'd into secondaries, if that's what you desire. Again, her main feature are her main guns. At 15 inches, she'll overmatch armor 25 millimeters or lower, so that gives her an edge against some heavily armed cruisers at higher tiers, and against battleships that have 25 millimeters or less bow, deck, um, upper plate, and of course aft armor. So that, to give you an example, that would be the Nagato, the Colorado, another Warspite, New Mexico, etc. The list goes on. So our main guns are decent. I'd rate them 8 out of 10. The real factor that reduces, that where she loses her 2 points is the fact that her firing range um, leaves much to be desired at higher tiers. When we go down to the AA defense, it's nothing more than serviceable. While the numbers appear to be high for her 20 millimeter and 40 millimeter guns, the range is also extremely low. So what does this mean for you? Well, in essence, you're going to be getting bombed, and you're going to be taking out maybe a plane or two at the same tier, but not before it gets to you, probably while it's on its way out. Same thing for her long-range AA guns. 5 kilometers range, so it's base, but at 38 average damage per second, it's really unlikely you're going to be shooting down any planes. And even if you spec into an anti-air build for the Warspite, you're not going to be effective enough against planes to dissuade them from attacking you. So it's really probably not worth it. Again, she has a defense against planes, something to do with her maneuverability, which is where we're at now. So her maximum speed is 23.5 knots. That's respectable, but it's still too slow. Her turning circle radius is 550 meters, and her rudder shift time is 14.2 seconds. Now, this doesn't sound a lot for her rudder shift time, admittedly, but that's not what I want you to look at. Her turning circle radius is 550 meters. She can dodge and weave and bob like she's in a boxing match. All right? So somebody launches torpedoes at you, they get spotted maybe 5 or 10 seconds away from your ship. It's very likely that if you're paying attention, you can dodge them. Inbound planes, turn. You're probably going to dodge most of the spread. So her maneuverability gives her an additional asset in terms of being able to mitigate the amount of damage she takes, which is a good thing. In addition, her maneuverability is really good because her turrets turn like they're um, weighed down in coal or something. I mean, the turrets turn so glacially slow that you can actually turn your ship to get the shot you desire. And oftentimes, as if you ever see me play the Warspite, I will do so because I have no choice. I can't wait for these turrets to turn. They turn so slowly. So the maneuverability is somewhat of a high point for this ship. In addition, her concealment is decent. Right now I have a concealment expert on, so we're going to remove him so you can actually see. What we're doing here, or what we're working with. So detectability is actually 13.8 kilometers. Detectability range by sea. Your main guns fire at 16.3. She's also really detectable by air. It's unfortunate because when you compare her to the Arizona, the Arizona has a much wider difference, right, between the two. And then when you look at the Warspite, you go back to the Warspite and you check the concealment, you realize that these numbers are far closer than they should be. When we put the captain back on, it looks like you can bring her down to 11.9, which is far safer, and 9.8 by air. So I'd rate her concealment as good. Not amazing, but good. For tier 6, it's pretty good. Pretty damn good. 11.9 kilometers, you can do a lot that range. Mind you, she only has 5 kilometer leeway for her guns, unless you're using the spotter plane. But if you're using the spotter plane and you're relying on your concealment to get extra damage in, chances are you're doing it wrong. Usually you'd want to get close with concealment to do extra damage. So those are the statistics of the Warspite. Let's talk about some modules you'd want to equip on her. You've got the main armaments modification 1. So as discussed earlier, her secondaries are decent, but not really worth speccing into. And her AA is worthless, virtually worthless, so not really worth keeping alive. And magazine modification 1 can be, or is of no use, because you can use a flag to prevent yourself from detonating. Also, detonations without the flag are extremely unlikely. So, really the only choice here is main armaments mod 1. When we look at the second row, or the second column of modules, there are 2 choices here for those of you who have different specs. Personally, I'd recommend Aiming Systems Mod 1. You still get a little bit of extra secondary battery, secondary battery buff with it, but the reality is reducing the dispersion of your main battery shells is exceptionally important. You could go secondary battery mod 2 if you find yourself charging into battle repeatedly. I don't recommend it. It's not my playstyle, but it may be yours, and I do understand that the secondaries on the Warspite are actually somewhat usable. When we go here, there really is no choice. Your propulsion and steering gears are rarely knocked out, and if they are, they're secondary to whatever else is going on in the fight. Damage control system modification 1 reduces the amount of chance you'll get of flooding and risk of fire. So it's a no-brainer. You have to put this on. Finally, here you have you can take any one of these 3 choices. Each one will provide you with a different benefit. Damage control system mod 2 will reduce the amount of flooding and flooding recovery time and fire extinguishing. This is really only useful for fire extinguishing. The reality of the situation is that if you get flooded, it's going to last a duration. Flooding lasts a very long time. It's going to last a duration if you don't have your repair up. But for the fire, it can be quite useful, especially when paired with fire prevention and basics of survivability, which I'll recommend in the build. So if you want to use this rather than propulsion or steering gear mods, I would understand and quite frankly think it makes a good move. The least likely module for you to use is the one that I have equipped. Propulsion modification 2. I personally love this module because it allows me to manage my speed better, which confuses the opponent, can confuse torpedo launches, can confuse enemy battleship fire. It will rarely protect me from anything else. But since those 2 things are really big dangers, then Propulsion Mod 2, Propulsion Mod 2 has been worth its weight in credits for me in this ship. I wouldn't recommend it. It's like I said, it's 3rd place. Damage Control System Mod 2 would be 1st place, and in 2nd place would be Steering Gears Mod 2. Now the reason for Steering Gears Mod 2 being 2nd and not 1st is you already have a really short turning time. You should be aware of your battle, of the area around you while battling, and this will allow you to make use of your slow rudder shift time nonetheless in your small turning circle radius to avoid be it torpedoes or incoming broadside shells. So reducing the rudder shift time, while helpful, isn't a necessity. Finally, you do have one more module available to you, Damage Control Party Modification 1, a special module which is obtainable either through Ranked, not this season by the way, but either through Ranked or Super Containers. It will increase the action time of Damage Control Party by 40%. What does that mean? Well, it means that instead of 5 seconds, your Damage Control Party will last a grand total of, I think, 7 seconds? So yeah, really not worth it. You know, you get an extra 2 seconds. It's not going to make any difference on the Warspite. I, in fact, have yet to use that module because it just doesn't really fit in any one of my builds. When we go to the captain, this is a somewhat new captain. I'm building it for ranked. It has a little bit of a greedier build, so I'm going to show two builds off. The build I would recommend highly would be priority target, high alert, basics of survivability, fire prevention, concealment, followed by adrenaline rush, and then any skills of your choice. Perhaps expert marksman, so your turrets turn faster, and you can get your shots off a little bit better. If you were going to build this as a secondary build ship, again, not recommended, then I would recommend priority target, adrenaline rush as your second skill. Oh, I forgot superintendent in the last build. You want to have the extra heal. It'll help. But for the secondary build, basics firing training, advanced firing training, probably IFHE, but I mean, I don't. Forget that. I wouldn't use IFHE on this build, but in any case, I would never use this build to begin with. It's just for those who would want to build secondaries. Manual fire control will reduce the dispersion of your shells by an extra 15% because you're a tier 6 ship. So it is useful, but it isn't as useful as it would be if you were one tier higher. So I don't know. You could use it, you could not. The reality is the rest of the build would be focused on survivability in my mind. So fire prevention, basic survivability, high alert. If you could afford it, expert marksman, and then preventative maintenance to protect your secondaries, your secondary guns, etc., etc. So I hope that that part was helpful. If I had to give the Warspite a rating, and I do because it's a review video, I'd give it a buy rating. It's a great ship, and quite frankly, it'll perform better, or has performed better for me, than I've seen the Hood perform. Um, I feel confident when I get up tiered into tier 8 matches, unless there's a carrier on the enemy team. I feel confident that I can handle myself just fine, so long as you play the Warspite a certain way. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're at the back, but you got to play smart when you're up tiered against the potential opponents that you're going to face. Stuff like the Bismarck and the Turp, it's quite prevalent, so you have to play smart against those ships. Aside from that, the Warspite overall, in my book, ranks as an 8 out of 10, a solid premium ship with a few weaknesses that through proper application of correct gameplay can be a powerhouse, especially because of her main feature being her guns, her 15-inch guns. So I hope this review was helpful. I would like to add an addendum, considering ranked season is going to be featuring tier 6 this season, so I'd like to add an addendum to that, and that is that if you're considering using a certain ship, a battleship, for ranked, that you take a look at my other video or another video I've made where I rank all the battleships in terms of effectiveness. I think the Warspite is going to be very effective. Since I do not own the Matsu, I'm going to be using the Warspite. It's number 2 on my list. It's a very strong ship. And her only weakness, really, when it comes to fighting other tier 6s, are planes. So if we were to look at this premium in just a tier 6 light, it would go from an 8 to a 9 easily. Again, her only weakness being planes and other battleships and cruisers that can penetrate her armor. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe and leave any comments or questions you may have. And take care of yourselves. See you soon.